Hey, thanks for checking out Nuts and Bolts with Tone, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about an 04 LLY Duramax that came in as a crank no start. So all I knew was that he was driving and it stalled and and then it would crank and it won't start, and that's it. That's all I got. So I scanned it. It had some codes, had some transmission codes. It had a lost communication with the glow plug module. But we live in California, it's the summertime, you don't need glow plugs to start it. And so that's it, I mean, that's all I got. So pretty much started looking at the scan data, cranking it over. We made sure that the primer on the fuel filter housing was primed up and it had fuel. Primer ball was hard and still no start. So went into the scan tool and looked at the fuel rail pressure sensor, and it read 1.4 megapascals, which is like 200 psi of fuel pressure. Well, that's not enough to start this thing. It needs like 5,000 or 6,000 pounds. It needs a lot. So 43 megapascals, I think, is what it's supposed to have, or MPAs. So anyways, so I write it up for more time, because now I got to start tearing into the fuel system. I get more time and I check it out, and the first test is basically checking the fuel relief valve in the back of the fuel rail on the driver's side. Let me show you what that looks like. Let's check it out. All right, here we go. 2004 Duramax LLY, crank no start. Scan for codes, no codes found associated with a no start. All right, so hooked up the gauge here, pumped up the primer, and had plenty of fuel. And the fuel rail would not build over 1.4 megapascals, MPAs. I believe it should build about 43 MPAs. So, performed the flow chart that led me to high pressure fuel system testing. And step one is to remove. All right, so here we go. Step one wants me to remove this return line right here from the fuel rail. So at the back of the fuel rail is a fuel pressure relief valve. Basically what you got to do is disconnect this fuel line here, and you're disconnecting it from the rail down here, and you're plugging off the hose, and you're putting a hose into a container and cranking it over with the ignition 1 supply fuse or relay for the FICM removed. Cranked it over, no fuel came out. That means that the valve at the back of the fuel rail is good. It's not allowing fuel to leave the system. Next step was to disconnect all the injector return lines on this side with the ignition 1 relay out, or well, they say relay, it's actually a fuse, 25 amp fuse. So you disconnect all of these, all right? Now, this was kind of cool because it allowed me to get a tool set out that I've only used once before. And that's this right here. Diesel injector adapters tool set. So here's what the toolkit looks like. It's got all these different adapters for the return nipples. Okay. So I've used this once before on a Sprinter. I replaced an engine in a 5-cylinder Sprinter. When I got done, it wouldn't start, and I went through everything trying to figure out why. Ended up disconnecting all the return lines, and I plugged all these in to the top of the injectors. And since the injectors are on top and they go straight up, I was able to just plug these in, and they stood straight up, turned the key on, and one of the injectors filled the tube up, indicating that that injector was passing the fuel back. I'll explain why it wouldn't start in a minute, but I replaced that injector and it started. All right, so there's another part of this kit is here. So you've got all these containers here and all these different tubes coming out. So what I had to do was find the adapter that worked for this engine, and I hooked it up. You can actually see the fuel in this tube right here. This is for the front injector on the passenger side. I did the driver's side first, which is what the flow chart says to do. If you diagnose diesels, this right here is on Amazon, and I don't think it was much, maybe 30, maybe 50 bucks, I can't remember. I'll look for it and put a link in the description. But basically, when you crank it over, no fuel should be returning out of the injector since it's not starting. So this front injector here, well, I checked on the driver's side and didn't get a drop of fuel out of any of the injectors. Then I came to the passenger side, and this front injector would get enough fuel where it would hit the #1 mark on here, and the whole line was full of fuel. And as soon as you turn it off, it all goes back into the injector. But I did it twice, and it filled it up both times. The other three injectors on this side are dry as a bone, no fuel returning. So this injector right here is bad. And so here we go. Now, this is the story of the diesel tech. I'll tell you about it, what I found on this thing. Let me tell you, hang on one second. Okay, so we're gonna recommend replacing this one injector, and it should start. Now, this engine here is the LLY, so all the injectors are external to the valve cover, meaning that we have to get the QR code, not the QR code, but the QR code off the injector, and we have to enter that into the PCM after we replace it. All right, let's get these notes in, and I'll let you know why this thing won't start because of it. Okay, so we checked that out. That tested good. Next step was to check the return from the injectors. So let me explain how a common rail diesel works so you understand how this can happen. Because this one has one bad injector. So #1 is bad. #1 is returning fuel out of the return, and it shouldn't be returning fuel out of the return. So the way it works is that you have a fuel rail which is like this big around, and it's, you know, as long as, not even as long as a head, and one on each bank. So there's not a lot of fuel in it. I mean, you can crack a line and it'll go like this. Whoop, the fuel's gone. It's empty. Like there's that much fuel. There's that little fuel. So these common rail diesels, they operate on a high pressure, low volume system. Now I've had 2 other case studies that's happened to me, and I'll tell you about it so you understand. I had a 5-cylinder Sprinter, and I replaced an engine. When I got done, it wouldn't start. Went through everything, chased my tail, finally put my fuel return kit on there and turned the key on, and even with the key on, one injector filled the tube all the way up. So it had a bad injector. So replaced the injector and started, no problem. Another time before that, I had a Cummins that had bad injectors, and we put injectors in it, and I was working with a new manager at my old shop, and he sold aftermarket BWD injectors. So I put 6 injectors in this thing, and it was a long process. This thing had a lot of problems, and it was a lot of steps to get this truck fixed. So basically we replaced these injectors, and then the truck went into a no start. Had to buy these capping tools to cap off the fuel lines. And basically what I had to do was back probe the fuel rail pressure sensor on the rail and turn on the key, and when you turn on the key, the voltage would go away, indicating that the pressure dropped immediately. So then you have to go and you have to disconnect all of the fuel tubes. As you come across, you have to disconnect the fuel tube and put a block off on that, and then turn the key on. Pressure still drops, you got to go to the next one. Pressure still drops, go to the next one. So then I think I got to #4. I think it was #4. So I get to #4, I block it off. Now number 6, 5, and 4 are blocked because I started at the back. So #4 is blocked, turn the key on, voltage stays. Okay, cool, so it's most likely #4. So then I hook 5 and 6 back up just to make sure, no drop, only #4. So I had to pull the valve cover and warranty #4 injector. And that's why I don't put aftermarket injectors in diesels anymore, because it just caused too many problems. So, but that was the same situation. Small fuel rail, not very much pressure, not very much volume. All it takes is for one injector to dump the fuel, and the whole engine won't start. So that's what's going on here. When you're cranking it over, the fuel rail's getting depleted, and it's just running right back through the return side on this one. So that's what happens on these. It's very common, And so now we got to get an injector, get this thing fixed. So that's how a common rail diesel works, and that's what we're going to roll with. So I hope you enjoyed this video on how a common rail works, a common rail diesel works, also a case study on this Duramax, and also maybe if you've never seen that return fuel system return kit, maybe you'll go out and get one, because I'm telling you, when you need it, and you can't beat it. And that one actually is really cheap, so I'm gonna look for the link of where I bought it and see if maybe I can't put it in the description below. It's very affordable and it's a good kit. So thanks for watching the video. Hit that like button. If you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button and hit the bell. You get notified of all my future content. Also check me out on Instagram at Nuts and Bolts with Tone for my daily life as a mechanic. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.